Welcome back to Sell It with Belle, where we continue to build perspective and knowledge through the stories of our guest. I am your host, Belle, and today I'm actually joined with a very special guest. His name is Michael Brovac. Thank you for coming on, Michael.
Thank you for having me, man.
Of
really
course.
Appreciate it.
Of course, man. Huge pleasure. How was the drive here?
It was iffy. Construction was pretty bad. It took me probably like 20 minutes extra than usual because of the construction. That's expected, though.
Right, but it's nice, though.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Finally beautiful.
Had the windows down, listening to music. I ain't complaining. I'm good.
It's got the short sleeve on.
Exactly, yeah. I should have wore shorts. It's too cold, too warm.
Honestly, my legs are sweating, man. But, man, you're looking good, man. How's life for you right now?
It's good, man. It's good. I've been really, really busy. Been doing a lot of things. Honestly, it couldn't be better. Compared to where things used to be and where things have been going. It's honestly perfect spot. Right,
man. I mean, I literally know nothing about your story, and at first glance, I ran down your Instagram feed. I was like, holy shit, this guy obviously has a story to tell. He's been through some shit. So yeah, I definitely want to listen and gain perspective and knowledge because that's what this is all about. And 100%. I feel like you're one of the most perfect examples of someone who can come on this podcast and shine that light.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. As I said before to this, it means a lot for you to share this with me and be able to allow me to come on here and give some advice, give some perspective, some impact. You know, that's at the end of the day what I try to do. So I just want to say thank you for allowing me to do that.
Of course. I mean, let's just take it back. I mean, how did it all kind of start off? How did life start off for you?
Well, from day one, my life was very different from others. You know, others, it was like, okay, you go through the usual school route. You know, you start to adapt habits and different things to gather yourself as a little kid. For myself, it was kind of like the first, I want to say, 80% of my life was all just precautions and being scared and being worried. The way I explain it actually is it's kind of like if you want to take how COVID's been with lockdowns and stuff, take that and put it into the perspective of from day one. So from the moment I was born, me and my little brother, well, I'll get into that after, but for myself, when I was born, I was diagnosed to a rare disease, and this disease was basically immune deficiency. And what that was basically your immune system is strong, my immune system is strong now, but we were at risk right out the gate. So for us to be able to go to school, for us to be able to go to the playground, for us to even go into a public outing, the doctors weren't sure if we could even do that because from day one, it showed signs that we were weaker and we were more sick. And with this disease, it came with a lot of issues with brain tumors, nephrotic syndrome, which is chronic kidney disease, kidneys were failing, lung disease, pneumonia, like tons of issues. And it was because my body wasn't able to actually properly take care of itself, nurture itself, as well as be what it's supposed to be because it didn't have any tools to do so. And so through this life of being in the hospital for 18 years prior to that, and because of that, it caused a lot of issues mentally with depression, anxiety, PTSD. A lot of my life I didn't want to live because there was no meaning to it because all I was doing was I was in a hospital or I was at high school or grade school and, you know, I'd have to hand sanitize the desks, get hand sanitizer before I went out, wear a mask sometimes. So that's why I say it's a lot like how COVID is, not so much right now, but how it began. And that's really what my life and what my little brother's life was beforehand. And before I kind of closed that door, my brother actually was born with the same illness. And he was 5 years old and I was so from day one, I had it till I was 18 and Cam had it. His name was Cameron. He had it all 10 years of his life. And so when he was 10, he actually passed away from it. And he passed away because his body basically gave up. And he also had no outer influences to help him to get out of that situation, let alone he didn't have any examples or anyone to look up to. And so that's why now I devote my life and I carry my own torch for him to be that guy for these kids who are in hospitals who don't have anyone to look up to. And I want to be that guy that they can look up to. And I also want to provide different kind, like an arsenal almost, that these kids and these people can go to who are in hospitals and see that they can actually be more than someone in a hospital and be outside of a hospital and actually have a life outside of that, you know? I hope that's a good summary. Kind of went off all over the place, but...
No, that was perfect. That's a beautiful goal. I mean, That's definitely something that a lot of people can't relate to. I mean, of course, everyone has their own problems, but people are born into maybe more extreme circumstances. And the circumstance you and your brother were born into may be one people look at and they're like, I'm very grateful that I'm not in that position.
Yep.
How soon was it after you were born, you had the immune deficiency? When did you get admitted into the hospital and spend time? Day one.
Day one. I would say day one I was in the hospital. You know, it's hard to remember that stuff. I know from my parents, like probably the earliest memories I have was probably when I was like 5 years old. And during that time, like, you know, my childhood was basically hospital, home. Then maybe like 20% of the time I was at school. But from day one, we were in the hospital. We used to call it our second home just because it was our second home. There wasn't anything outside of that. So therefore, we just believed that all we could do was be in the hospital or be at home. So,
what was spending all that time in the hospital, where to the point where you're considering it a second home? It's clear you're spending a lot of time there. What are kind of the challenges you face sitting in a room, maybe alone a lot of the time, people checking in on you? What's kind of like the mental state there, having to go through that probably every day?
Every day. I would say, and, you know, some people can maybe say different. So 2 things I would say. First of all, with my story and everything that's going on, I feel blessed because this is how I'm going to get into it, is even though I was in a hospital, even the circumstance was different, the feelings I felt are very relatable to anyone, right? So going to your question is, I personally say, and I'll say this to anyone, is the hardest battle in the hospital is actually not the hospital itself. It's your mind. And it's you being alone, you being connected to tubes, machines, can't even walk, don't even believe you can leave the hospital, and then going on your Instagram and seeing all your peers and friends partying and, you know, living life, which is all normal things, but you have to come to the realization that you just can't do that at that moment. And then let alone if you have no examples or no one around you to actually show you can, you're going to not want to live. And for me, that's what I believe is the biggest struggle. And I believe for myself that the mind is what controls everything. And so if your mind is in a state where it can't even function normally, let alone in a hospital circumstance, it's very hard to actually live, or it's very hard to actually look forward to things. And, you know, the 2 biggest problems I found was connection and belonging. I had a lack of those 2 things for 18 years. And the moment that I got those 2 things is when I was successful. But the moment I had none of those 2 things, I was very sick. I was very weak. I was very depressed. I didn't want to live. I didn't care to live, because it was like, why am I going to live? You know, and then on top of that, you want to go deeper. It's not the people's faults on the other side of the phone. It's just the circumstance you're placed in, and you have to be the guy to say and decide, what are you going to do with it? And the problem is there's no one telling you that. There's no one showing you that. And there's also no one to be there to actually guide you to go through with that, which is why my mission is now to be that guy to create that for others. And I actually will get into it, but the reason why I even got to this point was because I had that guide given to me, which was through my coach. And my coach was a really, really like crazy connection. And just by chance, he was able to see me literally the year I was planning to commit suicide. And if I never saw him, I would have committed suicide. And then when I met him, that's when everything changed. Everything.
Holy, I have goosebumps, man. When you're in that the hospital bed and you're kind of battling the phone, you know, seeing everyone else living their life through the phone, partying, stuff of that nature. Right. Highlights. Yeah. You're just watching the good parts while you're sitting in a hospital bed thinking, why did this happen to me? When did you kind of get past that maybe envy to have another person's situation and start accepting your own? And can we talk about what happened to your mental state when you start to accept your own situation?
I like that question. That's a really good question. I would say I was envious and very immature for 18 years of my life. And the moment that switched was when it had to be switched. Because not only was my immune system suppressed from drugs and from lifestyle factors, but it was already suppressed from how I was talking to myself, how I was feeling mentally, physically, which then reflected into the external, right? And the reason why I said it had to switch was because if I kept on playing that game and that narrative in my head, I would have ended up killing myself, or I would have ended up just dying, which was the whole goal in the first place to even be in the hospital for that long. Because after my brother passed, it was like, what's the point of living? I'm just going to end up like him. We both have the same syndrome. Why am I even going to try? So to the point of where I stopped having envy and jealousy was when I actually believed that I could have something more, which was where it came from my coach saying, you are more than just a kid in the hospital bed. And then I always had a hobby and a desire to want to play basketball. So it was like, okay, why don't we try and get you to train to play basketball despite you being in a hospital, despite you having tubes, despite all this shit. Just look at what you can do. And that's the part that switched. It was a reason, it was a why, and it was a want. And it was something that was never said and given to me prior to that point. And that's why I believe everything happened for a reason.
Right. So your coach saying that to you really sparked, you know, a kind of a different viewpoint for your own situation.
It did. It shattered every other perspective, because it was like, holy shit, I'm actually that, right? And the beautiful thing about that statement is you are more can be to anything. You know, a lot of people struggle with their jobs they don't like. You are more than just your job you don't like, that you work a 9 to 5 and you don't enjoy it. You are more than your abusive household. You are more than that crappy relationship. You are, you know, and so having that statement as now a universal thing is so amazing to be able to live by and also be the example for. And honestly, without that statement ever being said, I don't think I would even be here speaking to you right now.
Right. We've touched upon the mental battles you faced, and obviously, you know, myself know, anybody knows when you're in kind of a bad mental state, you don't want to do anything.
Nothing.
You want to lay there, you want to be depressed, whatever it may be.
Yep.
But I'm sure while you're sitting in a hospital bed, you have a routine, like you said, you have tubes connected to you, all of that stuff. What's kind of the process you have to go through each and every day while you're maybe just like done with it all?
Okay, so again, great question. So the routine. Well, there's two routines. There's a routine I did when I didn't care to live, and honestly, nothing really gave me any life other than just short-term fixes. And that routine was basically I would wake up every day, probably wake up, 11 o'clock. School day, I try and get up at 8, but I'd always be late to school because I had arthritis in every joint of my body, so I didn't care to really move much because it just hurt every step I took. So I would get up, and then if I was in the hospital, I'd get up, I'd get my mom to go grab me a coffee from Tim Hortons, I'd get a donut, and then I'd get my computer, my laptop, and I'd probably open it up, play some video games, see what friends are online at that moment. Then I would turn off the computer, go back on my phone, I'd get a chemo treatment or another medication, have a nap for like 2-3 hours, wake up again, repeat, and then go to bed fully at like 12 o'clock at night, probably wake up again the next day at 6 because of pain, and then repeat. That was the routine of being sick, not wanting to live, not caring to live, and just fighting every day to just find like that short-term fulfillment, which came from sugar, video games, distractions, social media, all this stuff. Now, the routine that I actually chose to acquire after I wanted to become better was I would get up and I actually had a piece of paper. And on this piece of paper, it had a bunch of goals that I wanted to complete. And those goals consisted of wanted to play basketball. I didn't want to have any pain. I didn't want to be in the hospital anymore. I didn't want to suffer. And I wanted to be able to actually enjoy and live life. And so I would actually read this piece of paper to myself every single morning in the hospital. And I read that piece of paper for probably a year straight. And then after I would usually read that, I would try and get up, and just for 2 minutes, I would walk up and down my hospital room. And my mom and dad, they would help me and support me with the machine. And I'd have to be careful with the tubes and everything, but I kept on walking. Then after that, I'd probably drink a little bit of water. I'd still have, don't get me wrong, I was still in the middle of it. So I'd still have like, Mom, hey, can you grab me a donut? Can you grab me my laptop? But I was actually implementing a different routine that I believe, and I know for a fact, is what's got me to where I am. And so after I would have, the short-term fix of like the donut, the video game, or whatever, I would actually go on social media in a different way. What I would do is I would, instead of looking at YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, and looking at all the things I didn't have and comparing myself, I started looking at the things I wanted to acquire. So I started looking at shoes. I wanted to be a sneaker reseller. So I started looking at how can I resell shoes? How can I make money selling shoes? What kind of shoes are coming out? I started to look at, okay, the NBA is on. I'm going to watch the NBA. I started to look at training programs that I can do when I get out of the hospital to shoot in the gym. And I started to listen to music also that replicated those kinds of feelings that it gave me, which was like Drake, Lil Wayne, J. Cole, like all that like hip hop vibe that kind of went correlated with the sneakers, the basketball, all in line with the values, right? So those I would say would be the two routines. And the one routine I said about prior to that where I didn't care about living was till I was 18 years old. And the time I started my new routine where I had an objective was probably when I was 19 years old. And that only came from my coach, Christian, being able to say, hey, Mike, you're more than just a kid in a hospital bed. And also coming to see me frequently and showing me and telling me proper things like, hey, Mike, you can do this. You can do this too. Why don't you come hoop with us? Even though you can't walk right now, I'm going to get you out. We're going to show you how to properly shoot. And just these little things, it was like the steps in the right action where prior I didn't take any steps because I didn't believe I could. That's what the shift was.
Right. I mean, I saw the video where you're sitting on the hospital bed reading your goals. And I mean, it was just like such a feel good moment to just watch. I mean, something like that. It's you know, it really shows you were trying at such a hard point.
Yeah.
I guess standing where you are today, you're across from me, you're looking good.
Thank you.
Back then, if you were to look back at the hospital, even whether you're doing good things back then or bad things, do you in any way cherish those times you spent there?
Yes. I would say I don't cherish, I would say I cherish people. I cherish people, circumstances, and little things. So like if we go to people, I had very, very loving nurses, very, very loving doctors, majority of the time. And they were like my second family, you know? When everyone else was going to parties and hanging out with their friends, I was hanging out with the nurses. They would come in my room. We'd talk about Drake. We'd talk about NBA. We'd watch the Raptors. Then on top of that, the doctors, they would spend extra time in my room and actually talk to me, communicate with me, and joke with me and talk about shoes. And so having those things actually built up the foundation to even feel good in that circumstance, right? And then I also had wonderful times with my parents and my little brother. You know, I there's so many stories with my little brother where it was just hilarious, like funny stories. Like one time we had a priest come in, and the priest was going around to each kid on the ward, and my brother, he was probably like, I don't know, 6 at the time. He was going through a rough time. He was very fragile, very skinny. He was pretty inflamed because of different problems. Anyways, the doctor came in, the priest came in, and he's in a state where he's already angry. He's already irritated at the circumstance, right? And the priest comes in, and the priest does like a little prayer, and he starts going like this, right? And my brother grabs his hand and starts going like this, like playing with it. And it just brought light to the situation, right? And then another time, I remember this was when it was deeper down the road. My brother, he was probably like 9 at the time. A year before he passed, he was in a very bad situation. Again, the priest came in, and he was talking to Cam, and he was saying something about having enough or something. And my brother just started like laughing, like sarcastically. And then he was like, of course I've had enough. And then he just showed, like, but in a joking manner, and to watch that and to feel those things, like, you know, the way I explain it is me and my brother was like, he was my co-op teammate. He was my co-op teammate. And he was my co-op teammate for 10 years. And when he passed away, I should say 16 because myself, when he passed away, my co-op teammate was gone. And I didn't have a revive to give to him. I only had a revive to give to myself. And so all the memories and all the great things that we had in that circumstance actually built the motivation and the proper tools that now I can provide to others in the present day, right? You know, without being in that hospital, without having these circumstances, without feeling these really bad feelings, without knowing how it actually works and living it, I wouldn't be able to help other kids. I wouldn't be able to be a coach. I wouldn't be able to even have motivation to get myself right, you know? So it's crazy how things come full circle.
Right. It's beautiful that you're able to even look back at the hard times and, you know, grasp little moments that you still probably use as motivation today to keep pushing forward. You mentioned that you're spending a lot of time at the hospital. It's your second home to your actual home, but then there's also a little portion where you have to go to school.
100%.
And, you know, high school can be a very daunting place, especially for people with insecurities,
100%.
You know, mental illnesses, whatnot. I mean, how is taking on that role and being in a high school and, you know, going through that?
You know what, man? And honestly, one of the biggest blessings I had throughout my whole experience is I was bullied back in the day, like way back in the day, but that was when kids were immature, people didn't understand, and even a little bit in high school here and there, but it wasn't anything serious. But the beautiful thing about high school was literally like everyone, I'm talking everyone, like in my high school, everyone in my classes, everyone in my peer group were so supportive and so loving and so caring and so like including. And like, you know, I talked about the connection and belonging part. When I went to school, I got the connection and belonging. If I didn't have that at school, I would have committed suicide, or I would have just ended my life through whatever, pills or drugs or the treatment that they were giving me, you know? But without having that piece of being at high school and having, like, I mean, the teachers, like my basketball coach had a huge influence on me. And actually in that video, you saw him. He was the guy passing me the ball. Like he went out of his way when I couldn't even walk, could barely even be at school. I was probably at school like 50% of the time because I was just sick half the time. He offered if I wanted to play on the basketball team, and he offered that right after my little brother passed away. And if he never offered that, I would have never had any other thing to look at or look forward to give us actual hope and, you know, motivation to actually get up the next day. And it actually helped my parents as well. So, you know, and then there's the second side to it where, yes, high school is very tough. Like, you know, I laugh about it, I joke about it, but me and my friends used to have a joke. Like, I was a grandpa. Like, anyone who knows me from high school, they would remember the days I would get to school late, early in the mornings, and I could barely get up the stairs because I had arthritis in every single joint of my body. I'd walk with my back hunched, could barely move my joints, nothing. And I used to joke about it with my friends, and my friends and I used to laugh all the time because it was like the first half of school, I was always gone. Like, I was done. Like, I couldn't do shit because I was just like a grandpa. And then there's, of course, the other part. Like, a big, huge problem is comparing yourself, right? And with social media. And so, you know, when you're not invited to parties, and again, there's the double parallel where you are invited to parties, but you can't participate, right? So it's not even the people's problem, is just how the circumstance is. Then on top of that, it's like, you know, the high school norm about hooking up with girls and like all that stuff. It's like you don't experience those things because, number one, you don't believe you can. Number two is you're sick. Number three is all you do is barely show up to class. So to even have that social interaction with people in general, it's barely there. So to bring it full circle, I would say my high school experience couldn't have gone better, but it did have a lot of things that were hard. But a lot of that reflected onto my end and just how it was living in my shoes, not really because people treated me like crap or I wasn't included. It was just because I wasn't in a position to actually appreciate those things and care for those things and have the capacity to actually enjoy those things.
Right. It's so clear that your coach played such a big role in just your development overall in probably every aspect. Being given that spot on the basketball team, I actually saw in the video you hit a 3-pointer behind the 3 line in the middle of a game. Yeah. I mean, what was that experience like? How was that experience?
It was awesome. It was something I really needed at that time. You know, that gave me a little boost where it's like, you know what, Michael, maybe we are something, you know, maybe we aren't just a sick kid. Maybe we can actually do something. And it was like a confidence builder, right? You know, I look at that and I a bit cringe just because it's like, you know, I know what I can do now, and compared to back then, it's just such a different parallel. And some days I'm like, oh man, I wish I could have played ball now back then, you know? But to have that moment, I still remember, like, it was a huge rush for me. Like, it was so exciting, and I was so thankful for it, and I was so happy about it. And it actually gave me a bit of wind in my sails when I went to high school the next day, you know, and it gave me a bit of a boost. And, you know, without that happening, again, it would have caused more damage down the road and pushed off the progressive movement that I made towards my goals, right? But yeah, my coach in high school, he was always helping me, always checking up on me. He would, you know, talk to my parents and make sure that they're okay with me, you know, participating and just things like that. He was always thinking about us, always thinking about the team, and he's always thinking about myself as well. You know, it wasn't like, oh, Brovac's not able to do something right now, we're going to leave him out. It's like, no, Brovac's not able to do something, but I see something in him where I want to include him. And then on top of that, my teammates, like, I couldn't have asked for better teammates. They all, you know, they saw something in me that was deeper than just a sick kid. It was like, this is Michael Brovac. He's not just sick. You know, we could poke fun at him. We can joke with him. And when people did those things with me, that's what, you know, elevated my life, especially during that time.
Right. And especially during that time, for the viewers that may not know you or have seen any part of your story, you actually didn't look how you look today. Your physical appearance was actually different while you're going through this immune deficiency. So I guess I'm how did that change? I mean, obviously, unfortunately, your brother didn't get to experience that. And I saw that you got done a bone marrow transplant. So I was just wondering if you can kind of run down that process.
100%. So yes, when I was in high school and prior to, I would say even till I was 20 years old. So only like a year and a half ago, because I'm going to turn 22 in September. But like, even from that point, I didn't look healthy at all. And I was always very inflamed. I had very chubby cheeks. I was very ill walking. My skin wasn't tanned. I didn't have life in me because honestly, I wasn't full of life. You know, as far as we go into the specifics, like we want to talk about our body actually being vital and healthy. I ate like shit. I slept like shit. I didn't drink water. I didn't take care of my mentality. I didn't exercise. I didn't move. So therefore, that's going to reflect. And then on top of that, I was on 30 medications day and night. All those drugs had different side effects.
30.
So, oh, yeah, 30.
30.
Yeah. Morning and night. Yep.
That's insane. I mean, it sounds insane.
Yeah. Up until I was like 19 years old, I was on 30 day and night. And all these had a huge change on what my actual, what's it called? Why is it not coming to me? Image was like with all these being into consideration, it wasn't me that was showing. It was parts of me combined with a bunch of other things that I didn't really want, but at the time I felt like I needed or I needed at that time. Right. And so with regards to that, the reason why the bone marrow was in the play was because at the time that was the only known cure, if you want to say, that the doctors had an idea of that could possibly help my cause of IPEC syndrome, which was the disease I had, which was immune deficiency. So when I was 18 years old, after they saw my little brother pass, they're like, look, they were blunt, they were direct. They're like, honestly, we wouldn't be surprised if your time's going to run out like very soon. And so we can offer you this transplant where if you do this, we can't promise you anything. We can't promise you that you're going to be successful. We can only say that it's a shot and it's something that can maybe change your cells and help your body actually mutate differently. And so I was like, number one, I was going to commit suicide. So I was like, all right, fuck it. If it kills me, great. If not, okay, we'll see how it goes, right? Then on top of that, it was like, all right, well, clearly I got to live here for some reason because my brother's gone. And clearly this is an opportunity for me to look at differently and maybe say, okay, maybe this is supposed to happen and maybe I'm not supposed to end up like Cam as well. Maybe I'm supposed to be here for a reason. And so with regards to the bone marrow, what that actually did was it was basically they took my old cells, so they killed all of them with chemotherapy. So I did chemo for about, I think it was 2 months. Chemo, 2 months, knocked out my immune system completely depleted me. And then what they did was they got another cell bag and they injected me with that. Now, they told me prior to that they said, we can't promise you that your kidneys are going to heal, your liver is going to heal, your lungs are going to heal, because all my organs were messed up. Like they all had serious damage done, number one, because of the drugs that I was on for so long. And number two, my lifestyle factors. And so going into it, I already knew, I was like, you know what, even if I make it through this, I'm probably not going to live because I don't want to live, because I'm going to go through this very hard time. But yet on the other side, it's not even promised yet that I can even see hope and see success. Yes, it may give me a new immune system, but what about my organs? What about my other insecurities I had with regards to my mentality? What about all these things? So honestly, I threw in the towel right when they told me that. It was great to have that opportunity, but this is where I go into the fact of what actually got me to where I am, which is, yes, I had that, and I had people and loving people around me. But the thing that changed was when I wanted to change. Because even after I received my blood donor cells, a year later, I was still in the hospital. I was still on 20 medication. I still didn't want to live. I could barely walk. I still wasn't fulfilled. So in my opinion, I wasn't living. I didn't have life. So that's when my coach came into play. And that's where it woke me up. And it was like, look, you're not going to get what you want just by hoping that some drug or some treatment is going to do it for you. You know, that doesn't give you abs. That doesn't allow you to shoot a basketball. That doesn't allow you to be confident. That doesn't allow you to actually walk and be able to speak the way you want to speak. You have to do those things yourself. And I'm thankful because my coach made me aware of those things. When I had this belief that, I'll just do this transplant and I'm either going to die with that or I'm going to commit suicide. He was like, well, Mike, actually, there's a whole nother side to it where you could do those two things. Honestly, best to you, whatever you want to do. Like, that's how you would talk. And that's what I needed, right? Because on most of my life, I was just blowing smoke up my ass because it was like, we can't put any more stress on him. When I met my coach, the first question he ever asked me, he said, you ever thought about killing yourself? First question, point blank. And I bawled because it was like, yeah, all the fucking time. But no one ever told me that, right? And so going into the hospital side of things is like, I was able to see that, holy shit, this life that I was living for 18, 19 years wasn't giving me the life I wanted to live. And I was thankful and I was blessed because I had someone that could actually show me how to get the life I wanted to live. And going into the things that I did to get that life is when I was in my hospital bed, I read to myself what I wanted to have. When I was told to maybe not walk, maybe not stand up because it could injure your spine, it could injure your limbs, I stood up, I walked. Now, I'm not saying you have to do these things or you should. I'm saying if you want something bad enough, you'll go do whatever you need to do to get it. And that was the point of my life that I was at. When I was in my hospital bed, instead of drinking Coca-Cola and coffee like I would drink prior to that, I started drinking water. And I had a goal and an objective to actually leave. That was the game changer. That was the thing that actually shifted everything. But if I never got those things in line, I would have just ended up being dead. And even if the bone marrow transplant was successful, which it gave me a new immune system, having my organs messed up, my lungs, my kidneys, my liver, still on medication, still wanting to commit suicide, I would have died anyways. So it wasn't from that. It was from the steps that I took after that. Because I had to get pushed to the rock bottom and to the point of where it was either I was going to leave or I was going to decide to want to live. And I hope that gives a good summary to what that all means.
That was perfect. I mean, it was definitely a risk you took, but even after you took the risk on getting the donor cells, you were still in the hospital for a year, a bit over a year, you said.
And I would have stayed in longer if I didn't change.
Right.
And I would have been gone probably because, you know, it's everyone can say what they want, but we have to take accountability for ourselves. There is no one else that can control us other than ourselves. And if we believe in God and faith, that's the two things that we have control over or that we can rely on. But to say that my life is in the hands of another person isn't realistic because that person can also have a downfall to your life or an upfall. But at the end of the day, you have to accept those two things and you have to use those two things.
Right. I kind of like how we did a full circle because one of the first things you said when you first, in the first couple of conversation, you mentioned how it all starts in your head and you really need to be the person to take control of your own situation mentally so you can, you know, showcase to the world what you're capable of. I guess I could put it.
Well, showcase to yourself.
Right.
Showcase to yourself. Because, you know, and I learned this from multiple mentors, but my coach Christian is, he would always say to me, he's like, Mike, in order for you to succeed in life, you have to succeed with yourself. Meaning whatever you want other people to see, you have to see on you. If you want people to see you as attractive, you got to look at yourself and say you're attractive. If you want other people to see that you're jacked and you're good looking, you have to know that yourself. If you want other people to see that you're successful, you have to create that too, right? And when I was told those things, again, that was the time where it was like, well, you're right. Because prior to that, like, I didn't see myself any of those things. And I'll be honest, still nowadays, it's a constant barrier. And I believe all of our lives, we have to deal with this critique or whatever we want to say. But it's so true, because if you don't believe you are something, how are other people going to believe you're something? And then on top of that, if you don't believe you're something, but then you allow other people to tell you you're something, you're, again, going back to the whole thing about allowing other people or other things to control what you are.
Perfect. One thing that you said that kind of surprised me is that your unhealthy habits in the hospital, you know, eating the donuts, the Coca-Cola.
Yep.
I guess the question I would have is, why would they allow that? I mean, were they kind of just like, trying to give you something that you wanted because of your situation?
Yeah.
Or like, why did that not stop when it should have?
So for me, I allowed that. Number one. Okay. So number one is I will never, and I did this for a long time in my life, and that's why I failed. A long time in my life is I blamed others for my illness. That's not the truth, because I took actions in my own power to create that illness to make it worse. Now, going to your question is, I was the one asking. I was the one asking for Coke. I was the one asking for coffee. I was the one asking for donuts. And when you see, so if we go into the perspective of, let's say, my parents are in it together. We're all in it as a team. When they see their son who's struggling to even get out of bed, and then on top of that is talking about wanting to commit suicide, and then on top of that doesn't believe he can be anything else, you'll do anything and everything to please that kid, right? Which I would do the exact same thing. Then on top of that, they don't have the educational means behind them to say, but maybe the sugars will elevate his sugars, and then that'll dysfunction his kidneys and all this. No one had that prior to me developing that as well, right? So for the parents, that was the one thing. They just wanted to see their kid happy, which I have great gratitude for, because even though the decisions I was making was messed up and it ultimately made me worse, I needed to get worse, because if I never got worse, I would have never changed. So me having the Coke, me having the caffeine, me having the sugars every single day was me digging myself a grave. And then eventually when I got to that grave, it was like, do I really want to go in there? And then I made the choice to say no. Then if we go to the doctors or nurses' perspective, they are seeing 50 to 70 patients a day. And they're not even in there when you are drinking Coke, when you are having sugars. Now, of course, these are all things that we know. We all know, okay, sugar isn't the best for us. We all know that caffeine isn't the best for us. But yet we all still do it. We have to have a reason and a more educational meaning behind it to know not to do it. And so as far as people allow me to do those things, I allowed myself to do those things. And honestly, it was no one else's responsibility to not allow me to do those things. And I'm actually thankful that happened, because again, like if I never got that bad, I would have never known what it was like to feel that shitty. So therefore, when I got little wins of like, oh my God, I can walk now, it was so big to me when other people would get it. It'd be like, I walk every day. Why does that matter? So to bring it back full circle, I don't believe anyone purposely chooses to make you less sick, or more sick, I should say, or less incapable. I believe, number one, that there's a lot of things in play that are outside of just being in that room. You got to take into consideration about how busy these people are. Doctors, nurses, how many people are they seeing on a daily basis, let alone how do they feel? How are they being? Are they drinking Coke? Are they having caffeine? Do they see a difference? It's all these things coming into consideration. So at the end of the day, if we take all that into evaluation, who has the say? You. You can only control you. So therefore, trying to get the parents to do different, or trying to get the nurses and doctor to maybe point out things that they're not even told to point out, is out of the boundaries. And that's where it comes to the fact of where, like, my coach coming in and first of all, developing a reason to leave, but also being like, yo, Mike, you want a ball? That's not helping you. You having sugar, that's inflaming your arthritis, which is truth. Sugar, inflammatory to your system. It's going to inflame everything. And if you want to get deep, why I was so inflamed for all my years was, yes, I was on 30 medications day and night. And yes, I had stress constantly released. But if we want to get into the facts of like what my diet was, what I ate, the way I slept, the lack of growth I actually had as a nervous system perspective, I had nothing. So to make sense of it all, it's like, okay, that makes sense, which is great, because now it's like, it's actually simple. We know the answers. It's not that you're rare. It's not that you're unique and there's nothing to help you. It's like, no, these are things that everyone deals with. Just maybe yours are heightened on another extent, which actually should motivate you more to actually go get it, which in the full perspective of things, that's exactly what it did.
Perfect. A big takeaway from this episode is healthy habits.
Yes.
I mean, that seems like the thing that really just pushed you to the next level out of your own personal circumstance.
Huge.
When you're taking on those healthy habits, I wanna know how you felt when you started to see the physical change, and then how you felt on the inside too in this last year or two.
Okay. Well, I still remember when I saw the physical change, I looked in the mirror and I just smiled. I was just very happy. I was very thankful, and I actually was amazed. Like I didn't believe that what I was doing was leading up to what it created. And then once I started to see continual results, you know, I'd wake up one day, I'd be like, my face is a bit more toned, go to bed. Next day, same thing. A month goes down the road. Holy shit, I can see my jawline. Holy shit, I can see my pecs. Holy shit, I can see my biceps. It was like a constant reminder to like, Mike, you're doing the right things, and this is possible. Like you're actually doing what you thought was impossible, and it's a pure reflection of what is possible. And so that feeling that I got every single day was almost like a constant boost. It was a constant reminder of like, okay, this is why we're doing it. This is the reason why we're getting up. It's working. It's working. And prior to that, I didn't feel like anything was working. So the moment I saw results, it was like, oh my God, I'm doing something right. Finally, I'm actually seeing success. So therefore, it motivated me even more and more and more and more to get at it every single day.
Perfect. Is there anything you could leave off on, maybe to someone struggling, maybe someone in a hospital bed? 100%. Is there any just last line of inspiration you could throw on someone?
100%, man. So I would say number one is that you need to know that those four walls that you're in, and maybe the people you see on a daily basis and the pain you're feeling and, you know, the lack of hope you feel, I need you to know, and hopefully by just watching and listening to this podcast and seeing me as a pure example, that you're more than all those things. You know, I talked about the quote my coach said to me, my mission is I'm that example of that quote. So therefore, when you watch this, you can know that to be truth. And I just want you to know that whatever you have in your heart, and whatever you desire to create or do, don't just push it under the rug. Listen to it, feel it, and know it. And also be open to maybe looking for help, looking for the correct help to get out, and knowing that you are more than just that circumstance.
That was perfect, man.
Thank you, man.
Big thank you for coming on.
Bro, thank you for having me.
An honor, man. Sell with Belle, episode 32. We're going to leave it on that. Guys, share this episode with a friend, family member. You may know that's going through it. I mean, it was just a privilege, complete honor to have Michael come on and share his story and, you know, give people that opportunity to look at his situation and gain some light from it. So, guys, there's not much I can say. Leave a like, subscribe to the podcast, and I'll see you guys next Sunday, 5:30. That's all.